She always sat near the back, never close to the front where people noticed you. That evening was no different. The hall was modest, the kind of place used for small gatherings, local talks, and quiet performances. Folding chairs were lined up in uneven rows. The lights were warm but a little dim, giving the room a soft glow. People walked in slowly, greeting each other with nods and half smiles, not expecting anything special. She had come only to support a friend who was helping organize the event. She told herself she would stay quiet, listen, and leave early. Music was not on her plan that night. The piano at the side of the stage was just another object to her, familiar but distant, like something from a past life she did not talk about anymore. She had learned long ago how to blend in. Growing up, she discovered that being unnoticed was easier than explaining herself. While others spoke loudly and laughed freely, she listened. While others chased attention, she avoided it. Music was the one place where she felt safe, but even that was something she kept private. As a child, she spent hours sitting at a worn piano in a small room at home. The keys were chipped, some slightly out of tune, but to her it sounded perfect. That piano listened when no one else did. When life felt heavy, when words failed her, she played. It was never about performing. It was about breathing. Years passed, and life pulled her in different directions. Responsibilities replaced dreams. The piano became something she visited only in her mind. She still played sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and no one was watching. She told herself that was enough. That night, the event had started slowly. People were finding seats, whispering to each other, checking their phones. Someone near the front spoke into a microphone, testing the sound. The feedback echoed briefly, then stopped. There was an awkward pause, the kind that makes people uncomfortable. The organizer leaned toward the piano and looked around, unsure what to do next. They needed a little background music, something simple to fill the space until the program officially began. Nothing serious, nothing emotional, just sound someone remembered her. It was not because she stood out. It was because, earlier that day, during setup, she had helped move chairs. In passing, a quiet conversation had come up. Someone mentioned the piano. She had smiled and said, without thinking too much, that she knew how to play a little now. That small comment returned to her like an echo. The organizer walked over and spoke softly. They asked if she could play something simple, just a short tune, nothing fancy, something light. Her heart tightened. For a moment, she thought she had misunderstood. Her first instinct was to say no. Every reason rushed into her mind at once. She had not prepared. She did not belong on a stage. People were watching. She had promised herself she would stay invisible. But the organizer smiled politely, clearly stressed and short on time. The request felt small, harmless. It would only be for a few minutes. No one would really listen. She nodded before fear could stop her. The walk to the piano felt longer than it was. Each step echoed in her chest. She felt eyes on her, curious but not interested. To most people, she was just someone filling a gap. She sat on the bench and adjusted it quietly. The piano was newer than the one from her childhood. The keys were clean, smooth under her fingers. She rested her hands in her lap for a second, breathing slowly. She reminded herself of the instructions, simple, short, background. Her fingers hovered above the keys. In that pause, something shifted inside her. The room faded slightly, as if she were standing between the present and the past. The noise of people settling down blended with distant memories. She remembered sitting alone as a teenager, playing the same gentle tune over and over until it felt like part of her heartbeat. She remembered the comfort of repetition, the way simple notes could carry deep feelings without trying to. She pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost shy, a basic melody, familiar and calm, just as promised, just as expected. At first, no one paid attention. Conversations continued. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor. Someone coughed. Someone laughed quietly. She kept playing. With each note, her shoulders relaxed a little. The piano responded warmly, the sound spreading through the room like slow-moving water. Her breathing steadied. The fear did not disappear, but it loosened its grip. She told herself to keep it simple. But music has a way of carrying truth, even when you try to keep it contained. Her fingers moved with memory more than thought. A slight change in rhythm here, a gentle pause there. Nothing dramatic, just honest. A few people near the front began to notice. One woman stopped talking mid-sentence. A man leaned back in his chair. Someone turned their head slightly toward the stage, surprised by how the sound felt. The melody was still simple, but it carried something else now. It felt lived in, like a story told quietly, without asking for attention. The kind of story people recognize without knowing why. She did not look up. She focused on the keys, on the way each note connected to the next. She played the way she always had when she was alone. Not for praise, not for perfection, just to let the feeling move through her, inside her. Old emotions stirred, not painful, but tender. Moments she thought she had buried gently rose to the surface. Nights spent practicing by dim light. The comfort of knowing the piano would never judge her. The sense of being understood without speaking. She had forgotten how powerful that feeling was. The room grew quieter. People were not silent yet, but the noise softened, as if the music was slowly asking them to listen. Even those who were not facing the stage felt something change. The air felt heavier, but in a calm way. She remained unaware of most of this. She was too deep inside the sound, following where it led. The simple tune became a place where she could finally let go of the weight she carried every day. Without noticing, her hands moved with confidence now, guided by instinct, still gentle, still restrained, but alive. Somewhere in the crowd, someone felt their throat tighten without understanding why. Someone else felt a memory surface, unexpected and vivid. Another person simply closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. What had started as background music was becoming something else. She did not plan it. She did not intend to move anyone. She was only doing what she had always done when she needed to breathe. The piano kept speaking, and the room, slowly, began to listen. The room was quieter now, though no one had officially asked for silence. It happened naturally, like people had all agreed without speaking. Chairs stopped moving. Phones were lowered. Even the soft whispers faded, one by one. The music was no longer just filling space. It was shaping it. She felt it before she understood it. The piano sounded different when the room listened. Each note seemed to travel farther, to stay in the air longer. Her fingers slowed, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to let each sound finish its thought. She still did not look up. Looking up would make it real, and real would bring fear back. So she stayed with the keys, with the familiar pattern beneath her hands. The melody remained simple, but now it carried weight. Like a quiet voice that had waited years to be heard, her mind drifted, moving gently through memories she usually kept locked away. She remembered the first time she had learned this tune. She was young, sitting on a stool that was too high for her feet to touch the ground. The room smelled faintly of old books and dust. Someone had shown her the notes and told her to practice slowly, not to rush. Back then, the tune felt plain, just something to learn before moving on to harder pieces. But she never moved on. Over time, that simple tune became a place she returned to whenever life felt too loud. She played it when she was tired, when she was confused, when she needed to remind herself that steady things still existed. The tune grew with her, changing shape as she did. Now, sitting at this piano, she realized she was playing it the same way she always had when she needed comfort. The piano responded to her touch, clear and warm. It did not judge the small pauses or the slight changes she made. It accepted them. In the audience, someone shifted forward in their seat. Another person crossed their arms tightly, as if holding something inside. A few people glanced at each other, surprised by the shared stillness. No one expected to feel anything tonight. They had come for a simple event, something ordinary. Yet here they were, caught in a moment that felt personal. She sensed the shift without seeing it. The energy in the room felt heavier, but also safer. Like everyone was standing under the same quiet sky. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the music, in and out, slow, steady. As she played, her thoughts wandered to the years when music had slowly slipped into the background of her life. She remembered making choices that felt responsible at the time, putting dreams aside, telling herself that passion was a luxury she could not afford. She remembered the last time she had played for anyone else. It was years ago, brief and forgettable. Someone had listened politely, then moved on. After that, she decided music was something better kept private. Yet here she was, doing the one thing she promised herself she would avoid. Her fingers moved into a gentle variation, almost without her noticing. It was still the same tune, but softer, deeper, like speaking the same words with more meaning behind them. A sound escaped from somewhere in the room, a quiet breath, shaky and unplanned. Someone wiped their face quickly, hoping no one would notice. She felt a tightness in her own chest. Not panic, something else, something close to relief. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to accept that people were truly listening. That realization scared her. Her hands trembled slightly, and one note came out sharper than she intended. For a brief moment, doubt rushed back in. She thought about stopping, about ending it cleanly and stepping away before she went too far. But then she remembered why she started playing in the first place. Not to impress, not to be perfect, but to survive moments that felt too big to hold. The lone. She softened her touch and continued. The music wrapped around the room, gentle but firm. It asked for nothing, yet it offered understanding. People leaned into it without realizing they were doing so. Someone in the back closed their eyes, letting memories surface that had been quiet for a long time. Someone near the aisle held their breath, feeling a lump form in their throat. Another person stared at the floor, suddenly aware of emotions they had pushed aside for years. The tune carried no words, yet everyone seemed to hear something different. For her, it was a reminder. She remembered nights when she sat alone, believing no one would ever truly understand her. Back then, the piano was the only thing that stayed. It did not leave. It did not ask questions. It stayed and listened. Now, in this room full of strangers, she felt that same sense of being held. Her shoulders dropped, her back relaxed. The fear that had followed her onto the stage slowly faded into the background. She was no longer filling time. She was sharing something real. The organizer stood off to the side, watching quietly. What was supposed to be a short, simple tune had stretched far beyond its purpose, yet no one moved to stop it. No one wanted to break the moment. The piano's sound softened again, like a whisper near the end of a long sentence. She slowed the tempo, letting silence slip in between notes. Silence, she realized, was part of the music. The room leaned into that silence, holding it carefully. Her thoughts grew clearer. She felt present in a way she had not felt in years, not worried about what came next, not thinking about the crowd. Just here, now, with the sound she trusted. She wondered, briefly, how many people in the room were carrying stories they never shared. How many had learned to stay quiet, like she had. How many were hearing their own feelings reflected back through the keys. The idea made her play more gently. She wanted the music to feel safe. Another soft variation flowed out, almost like a breath of reassurance. It was not planned. It simply arrived. A few people shifted closer to the edge of their seats. The air felt thick with attention, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that comes when something honest is happening. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a strange mix of sadness and peace. For years, she had believed this part of her life was over, that music belonged to a past version of herself. But in this moment, she understood something important. It had never left her. She had only stopped listening. The piano continued to speak, and she allowed it. The tune moved toward a natural pause. Not an ending yet, but a place to breathe. She held the final note longer than before, letting it fade slowly into the room. No one clapped. No one moved. They were waiting, and she realized, with a quiet certainty, that this simple tune had already become something much bigger than she ever intended. She took a slow breath and prepared to continue. She continued playing, but something inside her had changed. It was no longer just memory guiding her hands. It was awareness. She could feel the room now, even without looking up. The silence between the notes felt full, like everyone was holding the same breath. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, as if the piano were fragile. Each note mattered. Each pause mattered. She allowed the melody to open up a little more, not louder, not faster, just deeper. The tune was still simple, but now it carried layers. Like a calm lake hiding depth beneath the surface, she felt emotion rising again. Stronger this time. Not sharp or painful, but heavy, like something long carried. For a moment, she worried it might spill over. She swallowed and kept her eyes on the keys. She had learned years ago how to stay composed. Life had trained her well. There were many moments when she had to be strong without support, quiet without comfort. Music had always been the place where she let those feelings exist without needing to explain them. Now, those feelings were flowing out into the room. In the audience, people shifted, not out of restlessness, but because something inside them was stirring. A man near the aisle pressed his lips together, his jaw tight. A woman a few rows back rested her hand against her chest, as if steadying herself. Someone else leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the stage. They did not know her story, but they felt it. That was the strange power of the moment. The music did not belong only to her anymore. It belonged to everyone who was listening. She allowed the tune to rise slightly, just enough to give it lift. The sound filled the space without overwhelming it. The piano seemed to respond with warmth, as if it understood the care in her touch. Her thoughts drifted to a time when she believed sharing her feelings was a weakness. She remembered choosing silence again and again, because silence felt safer. Speaking, or playing, meant risking being misunderstood, yet here she was, taking that risk without meaning to. The organizer glanced around the room, uncertain but moved. This was far beyond what had been planned. Still, no one reached for the microphone. No one checked the schedule. The moment had taken control. She felt a slight ache in her chest, the kind that comes before tears. She slowed again, letting the music soften, giving herself space. The tune dipped gently, like a voice lowering to a whisper. She wondered, briefly, what would happen when she stopped? Would the spell break? Would the room return to normal, loud and distant? She pushed the thought away. Right now was enough. Her hands found a familiar progression, one she had played countless times in the quiet of her own space. It was comforting, grounding. Her breathing followed it naturally. In the crowd, a quiet sound escaped someone's throat. Not a sob, not quite, but close. A few heads turned, then turned back toward the piano. No one judged. Everyone understood. The room felt smaller somehow, more intimate. Like walls had moved closer to hold the moment inside. She felt her shoulders loosen further. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel alone while playing. The piano was not just listening. The room was listening too. Her fingers trembled again, but this time it was not fear. It was emotion being allowed instead of restrained. She let it move through her hands rather than fighting it. The melody carried a sense of longing now, gentle but clear. It spoke of waiting, of hoping, of holding on even when nothing promised to change. It was not sad, exactly. It was honest. People felt that honesty. A man in the back wiped his eyes quickly and looked down, embarrassed by the reaction. A woman beside him noticed and gave a small nod, the kind that says, "It's okay." Others stared straight ahead, blinking slowly, not wanting to miss a second. She still did not look up. She knew if she did, the weight of their attention might overwhelm her. So she stayed focused on the keys, on the way the light reflected softly off the polished surface. The piano bench creaked slightly as she shifted her weight. The sound blended into the music. Unnoticed. She realized something important then. She was not performing. She was communicating. That understanding changed everything. The music grew a little fuller, not louder, but more confident. The tune expanded, reaching places it had never gone before. Even in her private playing, it felt like a door opening slowly. Her heart beat steadily now, calm, present. The crowd followed her without effort. They trusted where the music was leading, even though they did not know the destination. Somewhere in the room, someone thought of a loved one they had lost. Somewhere else, someone remembered a moment of quiet happiness long forgotten. Another person simply felt seen for the first time in a long while. None of that was planned. She played on. The piano's sound wrapped around the room like a soft blanket. No sharp edges, no rush. Just steady, human warmth. She felt a tear escape despite her effort to hold it back. It slid down her cheek unnoticed, falling away as she kept playing. She did not wipe it away. There was no need to hide anymore. Her hands moved with care, each note placed gently, as if she were setting something fragile down. The organizer took a small step back, giving her space. This was no longer about filling time. This was something rare. She reached a point in the tune where she usually stopped when playing alone. A natural ending, a place to rest. She hesitated. The room waited with her. She realized she was not ready to let go yet. So she continued, allowing the melody to shift again, this time carrying a hint of hope. Not loud hope, quiet hope, the kind that exists even when life is uncertain. People felt the change immediately. Shoulders lifted slightly, breaths deepened. The heaviness softened without disappearing. She felt it too. A warmth spread through her chest, steady and reassuring. She had forgotten this feeling, the feeling of trusting herself. Her fingers slowed as the tune moved toward another pause. This one felt different, closer to something important. The final notes of this section hung in the air, gentle and unresolved. Still, no one moved. Still, no one clapped. They were with her. She took another slow breath, knowing that whatever came next would change everything, even if she did not yet understand how. The next notes came more slowly, as if she was choosing each one with care. She was no longer just following memory. She was listening to herself, to the room, to the quiet connection that had formed without permission. It felt fragile, like glass, and she did not want to rush it. Her fingers pressed the keys with gentle confidence. The piano answered with a sound that felt warmer than before, fuller somehow. The tune moved forward, carrying the soft hope she had just allowed into it. But it also carried everything that came before. The weight did not disappear. It simply learned how to sit beside the light. She felt her chest rise and fall more deeply now. Each breath felt honest. She was not hiding anymore. Not from the room and not from herself. In the audience, people were changing in small ways. Some sat straighter. Some leaned closer. A few held their hands together tightly, fingers intertwined. No one whispered now. Even the smallest noise felt too loud for the moment. Someone near the middle of the room quietly wiped their face, then stopped, realizing there was no need to pretend. Another person took a slow breath and let it out, shoulders shaking just slightly. She sensed all of it without seeing it. The music continued, steady and patient. It did not rush toward a peak. It did not demand attention. It simply stayed, inviting anyone who needed it to step closer. As she played, her thoughts returned to moments she rarely allowed herself to visit. Times when she had wanted to speak but stayed silent. When she had needed help but told herself she would manage alone. Those memories did not hurt the way they once had. They felt softer now, like old photographs held carefully. She realized the music was doing something she had not expected. It was forgiving her. Her fingers moved into a gentle rise in the melody, subtle but clear. It felt like standing up after sitting for a long time. Not sudden, just natural. The room followed. People felt the shift without understanding why. The heaviness that had settled earlier began to change shape. It was still there, but it felt shared now, easier to hold. She allowed herself to lift the volume just slightly, enough to fill the space more completely. The piano's sound reached the corners of the room, touching walls, chairs, faces. Someone in the back closed their eyes and tilted their head, as if listening with their whole body. Another person rested their chin in their hand, staring at nothing, lost in memory. She felt a tightness in her throat again, stronger this time. Her eyes blurred briefly, and she blinked, refocusing on the keys. The notes wavered for a second, then steadied. She did not stop. Stopping would feel like turning away from something important. The tune flowed onward, no longer just a series of notes, but a quiet story unfolding. It spoke of endurance, of staying soft in a hard world, of finding beauty in simple things. The organizer stood frozen at the side, forgotten. The schedule no longer mattered. Time felt stretched, flexible. She noticed how calm her hands felt now. The shaking was gone. In its place was a steady warmth, like trust settling in. Her mind drifted to the idea of being seen, truly seen. Not watched, not judged, but understood. For most of her life, that idea had scared her. Now, it felt like a relief. In the audience, someone finally let a tear fall freely. Then another, then another. No one looked away. No one felt embarrassed. The music had made space for that release. A man near the aisle leaned forward, elbows on knees, face in his hands. His shoulders rose and fell slowly. A woman nearby reached out and rested her hand lightly on his arm. They did not speak. She felt the emotion ripple through the room like a wave, gentle but powerful. Her playing softened again, as if acknowledging what was happening. The piano seemed to breathe with her, matching her pace. She remembered something she had once believed, long ago, that her feelings were too much, that it was better to keep them contained. Sitting there now, she understood how wrong that belief had been. Her feelings were not too much. They were human. The melody moved into a quieter passage, one that felt like resting your head against someone's shoulder, simple, safe. People leaned into that safety. The room felt connected in a way she had never experienced before. Strangers sharing a moment without words. Bound by sound and silence, she allowed herself to glance up for the first time. Just for a second, what she saw almost broke her. Faces were turned toward her, but not with expectation or judgment. They were open, soft, present. Some eyes were wet, some were closed. All were listening. She quickly looked back down, heart pounding. But something had changed forever. She knew now that this was real. The music swelled gently, carrying that realization with it. The tune felt fuller, braver. Still simple, still grounded, but unafraid. Her fingers moved with certainty, guided by something deeper than practice. She trusted the sound. She trusted herself. The audience stayed perfectly still, as if afraid movement might break the spell. The piano filled the room with a warmth that felt almost physical. She felt a tear fall onto her hand this time. It landed between two notes, unnoticed by anyone else. She smiled faintly and kept playing. The melody reached a place that felt like the heart of the story. Not an ending, not a beginning, a truth. She slowed again, letting each note settle fully before moving on. The silence between sounds felt sacred. Everyone waited with her. She knew the next part would be the hardest, not because of difficulty, but because it would ask her to let go completely. She took a steady breath, hands hovering for a brief moment over the keys. Then she pressed down again, ready to follow the music wherever it needed to go. Her hands moved again, slower at first, then with a quiet certainty. It felt like stepping into deep water, trusting it would hold her. The notes came out gentle but firm, carrying everything she had gathered along the way. The piano no longer felt like an instrument. It felt like a bridge. The room leaned in without realizing it. Breaths were shallow and careful. Even blinking felt loud. The air held a kind of patience, the kind that appears when people sense something meaningful is unfolding. She let the melody stretch, not to show skill, not to impress, but to give the feeling room to live. The tune grew just enough to feel complete, like a thought finally spoken after years of silence. Her chest tightened again, but this time she did not resist it. She welcomed the feeling, letting it guide her touch. The piano answered with warmth, each note landing softly, then staying just long enough to be felt. She remembered moments she had kept hidden even from herself, small disappointments that stacked up quietly, choices made out of fear rather than desire, days when she told herself she was fine because it felt easier than admitting she was tired. Those memories did not rush her. They stood beside her, calm and honest. The music changed shape again, almost without notice. It carried a sense of release now, like a long-held breath finally being let out. The tune stayed simple, but it felt open, as if it was no longer afraid of being heard. In the audience, something broke open. A woman near the front pressed her lips together, then gave up trying to hold back tears. They fell freely, quietly. She did not wipe them away. She just listened. A man rose back, lowered his head, and covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook once, then steadied, as if the music had given him permission to feel without explaining why. Someone else reached for a tissue, then paused, realizing there was no need to hide anything here. The sound of the piano wrapped around them all. Steady and kind, she felt it happen. The shift from tension to surrender. Her own breathing changed. Her back relaxed against the bench. The weight she had carried for so long began to loosen, not because it disappeared, but because she was no longer carrying it alone. She played a gentle rise in the melody, not dramatic, just enough to lift the room. The notes shimmered briefly, like light moving across water. People felt hope in that lift, not the loud kind that demands celebration, but the quiet kind that says, maybe things can soften. Maybe it's okay to keep going. She glanced up again, just for a moment. This time, she did not look away immediately. She saw people exactly as they were, open, vulnerable, human. Some eyes met hers briefly, then looked away, overwhelmed. Others stayed fixed on her hands, as if afraid to miss a single movement. She felt a wave of emotion rise so strong it almost stopped her. Her fingers hesitated above the keys. The room waited. She closed her eyes. Then she played. The melody flowed with new freedom, as if a door had finally been unlocked. It was still the same tune, still rooted in simplicity, but now it carried everything she had held back for years. Gratitude, sadness, relief, love. Her tears came more freely now, slipping down her face as she played. She did not wipe them away. Her vision blurred slightly, but her hands knew where to go. They had always known. The audience felt it all. The music reached them in waves, each one stirring something different. A memory of a parent, a lost chance, a quiet moment of joy that had been forgotten. People felt connected to themselves and to each other in a way that felt rare and precious. No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to break the moment. She allowed the tune to grow just a little stronger, then gently brought it back down, guiding the room with her. The piano responded like an old friend, steady and loyal. Her heart felt full and fragile at the same time. She realized then that she was no longer afraid of the ending. Whatever came next, this moment had already changed her. The melody began to slow, not signaling the end yet, but preparing for it. Each note felt deliberate, like a careful step. In the crowd, people leaned closer, sensing that something important was approaching. Some held their breath, some pressed a hand to their chest. She played a familiar phrase one last time, softer now, almost like a goodbye. The sound lingered, stretching out into the quiet. The room felt suspended. She held the final note of this section longer than any before. letting it fade naturally, trusting the silence to carry it the rest of the way. When the sound finally disappeared, no one clapped. No one spoke. The silence was not empty. It was full of feeling, heavy and warm. She sat still, hands resting lightly on the keys, eyes closed, breathing slowly. She felt drained and alive at the same time. A single breath escaped someone in the audience, shaky and soft. Then another. Still. No applause. They were waiting for her. She opened her eyes and looked down at the piano, a quiet smile touching her face. She knew now that this was not just about music. It never had been. It was about being honest. About letting others see you, about allowing yourself to feel without shame. Her fingers hovered above the keys again, ready for what would come next. She sensed that the final part of the story was close, and it would ask her for everything she had left. She took one deep, steady breath, and then she pressed the keys once more. The sound returned softly, almost like a whisper. She played as if the piano were breathing with her, rising and falling in calm waves. The notes felt lighter now, not because the feeling was gone, but because it had found its place. This was no longer about release alone. It was about acceptance. The room stayed perfectly still. People were no longer waiting for something dramatic. They were simply present. The silence between the notes felt friendly, like a pause in a conversation between people who understood each other. She let the melody settle into a gentle path, familiar but peaceful. It carried the sense of coming home after a long journey, the kind of relief that doesn't shout, only smiles quietly. Her hands no longer trembled. They moved with calm confidence, guided by trust rather than fear. She realized she was enjoying this moment instead of bracing for it to end. In the audience, people felt the shift. The heaviness that once sat in their chests began to soften. Tears slowed. Breaths deepened. Some wiped their faces and let out quiet laughs of relief, surprised by the calm that followed such emotion. The music felt like a shared exhale. She played a gentle variation, one that sounded almost like gratitude, not directed at anyone in particular, but toward the moment itself, toward the piano, toward the people who had listened without asking for anything in return. She thought about how close she had come to saying no earlier that evening, how easily this moment could have never happened. The thought made her chest tighten briefly, then ease. Sometimes, she realized, small choices carry quiet miracles. The melody grew simpler again, returning to its original shape. Full circle. The same tune she had been asked to play at the beginning, now changed by everything that had happened in between. People recognized it, even if they didn't know why. It felt familiar, comforting, like the end of a story where nothing flashy happens, but everything feels right. She slowed her pace, allowing the tune to breathe. Each note felt like a gentle goodbye, not sad, not final, just complete. In the front rows, people sat with soft expressions, eyes still glossy but peaceful. Some held hands now, others rested back in their seats, shoulders relaxed. The organizer watched quietly from the side, deeply moved. They had planned an event, but they had witnessed something far more meaningful. She played the last few notes with care, letting them fall naturally, one by one. No rush, no hesitation. The final note lingered in the air, fading slowly until it became silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then someone stood. They didn't clap right away. They simply stood, hands pressed together, eyes full. Then another person stood, and another. Applause followed, gentle at first, then growing. Not loud or wild, but deep and sincere. The kind of applause that comes from gratitude rather than excitement. She sat frozen for a second, unsure how to respond. The sound washed over her, warm and overwhelming. She stood slowly, hands shaking again, this time from emotion. She did not bow. She simply placed a hand over her heart and nodded once. The applause continued. Some people wiped their eyes as they clapped. Others smiled softly, still caught in the feeling of the moment. She felt a warmth spread through her chest that she had not felt in years. Not pride, not relief. Something quieter. Belonging. When the applause finally faded, the room stayed calm. People did not rush to leave. They lingered, speaking in low voices, careful not to break what had been shared. A few approached her slowly, not to praise, but to thank her. Simple words, honest words. She listened more than she spoke. Someone said the music reminded them of home. Someone else said it helped them breathe again. She nodded, understanding without needing to explain. Eventually, the room began to empty. Chairs scraped softly. Coats were gathered. The lights dimmed a little more. She returned to the piano bench one last time and rested her hand on the keys. The instrument felt familiar, like an old friend she had almost forgotten. She smiled. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the world felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just more open. She realized something important then. She did not need a stage to be heard. She did not need permission to feel. Music was not something she had lost. It was something she had carried with her all along. And now, she was ready to carry it forward again. Not for crowds, not for applause, but for moments like this, where honesty turns into connection, and simple notes become something unforgettable.